Today, we are inviting you to journey back to a time when the world's first hospitals were because of medical innovation in the Islamic Golden Age. These early Islamic hospitals, known as Bimaristans, were not mere shelters for the sick, but training centers of medical excellence. They laid the foundation for modern medical practices and patient care that we see today. Thank you for joining us again on another episode of Chatting with Slava the Jordanian. I'm your host, STJ. And I am here today with our panel, Dr. Ihab Abdelrehim, and my one and only co-host, JD Yusef. Welcome back. So we thought that we will introduce this phenomena with historical facts and data and help you guys as our audience come to your own conclusions. So I would like to start with Dr. Ihab Abdelrehim and allow him to introduce some of the research facts and data that he stumbled upon.
So just to define Bimaristan, it is a Persian term, just to start there. Bimar means a sick person or sick people. Stan means a place. So basically, a Bimaristan is a place for sick people. So that's kind of where the hospital came from originally. Now, kind of going back in time to during Christian Europe, they would see people in pre 600 AD. They would see people at monasteries. So sick people would come into a monastery. It wasn't really a hospital. And they would come and, they might use prayer or maybe some herbs or whatever they would need to use. But they hadn't had that advancement yet that there's a specific location to bring anybody who was sick. Okay. So that didn't happen till the medieval Islamic world. And they started an expansive system of treating the sick comparable to modern hospitals we have now, actually. So this all started in the year 627 when the Prophet Muhammad was alive, when a woman named Rufaya al-Aslamiyya set up a treatment facility in a tent during the Battle of the Trench. Okay. Following that battle, the concept of this mobile Bimaristan expanded into a larger concept, and they had dedicated units found in different cities, okay, and throughout the Islamic world, equipped with medical herbs, pharmacies, and full-time physicians at that moment. Now, the first Bimaristan, which I think Yusuf and I were discussing, was in Damascus. It was opened in the year 706. Followed by several more, and I'm giving kind of just a global view here, and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty in a second, followed by several more in the following centuries in Granada, Cairo, and Baghdad, okay, during the famed Abbasid Caliph Harun al-Rashid, okay? By the 15th century, this is a really cool thing, in Muslim Cordoba in Spain, reportedly they had 40 to 50 hospitals active at that time. That is a lot of hospitals in one city. So it just shows the advancement of the Islamic tradition on medicine and curing people. But we can get into that a little bit later and get, dive into the details here in a second. But JD Yusef, what do you have if you have some kind of starting point for us as well? I don't know.
Yeah, and thank you for all of that eye-opening data, honestly. And just to kind of tie in Dr. Slava as well, why were monasteries, kind of the first place where people would think, it's called upon in the Christian religion is to take care of the needy and the poor. And also before this podcast, Dr. Slava mentioned something about the Islamic religion and it's, and Dr. Slava, if you can talk about a little bit of why it's necessary to take care of the needy and the sick, and also to stay clean in these environments?
Yeah, so part of the Islamic culture teachings is to share what God had blessed you with the ones that were not as fortunate as you are. The concept is basically, or the idea is basically, when you do that, God will grant you even more blessings, since He knows that you are going to share that fortunate items, fortunate incidents. For example, when we end up having our firstborn, especially if it's a boy, that's going to carry the lineage and the name of the family. But regardless, the firstborn, we intentionally go and sacrifice lambs and donate that food to areas and neighborhoods that in need, to share that kind of gift and blessings with the rest of the world, to say, thank you, God, for bringing this child healthy into this world. And it is obviously a divine gift. And here is how I am going to show my gratitude, by sharing, feeding, and bringing some kind of an ease for the need. So that concept alone, every time God opens a door, you are expected, and you are understand also that you should share that event with the underserved and the underprivileged. So that's number one. The cleanliness part, when I was in elementary school growing up in Saudi Arabia, one of the sayings that we learned, and one of the first sayings that I ever remember, is النظافة من الإيمان والوساخة من الشيطان. That's how they scared us to, stay clean, because of course we were trained to pray 5 times a day. And if you are meeting your Creator 5 times a day, you need to meet Him out of respect in the most, impeccable way. You need to be clean. You need to smell really good. You need to have a respectful attire. Now, obviously, sometimes that's not practical, because if you own a store or a shop and you are walking in the street and it happens they call for a prayer, you do the best you can. That's forgiven. But if you're home and you are, in a place that makes it available for you to clean yourself a little bit, you have to face your, divine, your Creator, in the most impeccable way. So in order for us to stay clean, right, we have to stay clean, because we pray five times a day. And also, we were taught, before you go into bed at night, make sure you are wudu, okay? Because that's why there's Salat al-Isha, which is the fifth prayer of the day. You are going to clean up to pray that last prayer. So if you go to bed clean, let's say you pray al-Isha and then you go out with your friends, you're having a cup of coffee, and you come home. You got to clean yourself from the street, right? Before you go into bed, because just in case, we were told, just in case that you don't wake up the next morning, or your Creator decide that, all right, this is it for you, you face your Creator clean and decent looking. So, النظافة من الإيمان, cleanliness is part of your faith, and not being clean is the act of the devil. That's how they scared us. Of course, it's not in Quran, it's not in Hadith. It's just something that our culture have created in order to relate the message as simple as possible, as comprehensively as possible to the children in order for them to obey and say, okay, I got to wash my hands, I got to wash my face before I pray. So yeah, it's always been part of our custom and part of our culture. Now, going back to the term Bimaristan, that was altered as time went by. And our parents, when we were acting so nutty and crazy and misbehaving, my mom used to yell at us and she will say, "What's wrong with you? You're acting like the patient Bimaristan." Because we're going to come to the point that Bimaristans, those hospitals, they were not only limited to medical conditions, they were also treating mental health, which is very interesting. And they were treating also a patient that suffered from, severe psychological conditions. So Bimaristan was a lingo kind of word that my parents used to throw around when we would not behave. It's like, stop acting like people in the Bimaristan, which I did not understand why that word. I thought it was a Turkish word. But I knew that it referred to a mental asylum or a mental institution, and then we'll stop misbehaving. It's like, no, I don't want to go. I don't want to go there. I promise I'll misbehave. Until honestly, when Ihab did his research, and I just completely froze. And remember, Ihab, I asked you, and I said, "Say that again." And he said, "Yeah, they call it Bimaristans," and that was very, very interesting. To find out after, 50 years. I had no idea where it came from. But I hope that answered your question. So back to you, Yusef.
Yes. No, that was exactly what I was looking for. So thank you for that, bit of insight. And going back to Dr. Ihab's point, it was actually Caliph al-Walid in 707, who actually founded that first hospital in Damascus. Again, one of the earliest public hospitals, staffed with salaried doctors, pharmacists, separate wards for men and women and infectious diseases, and a mental asylum as well. In Baghdad, 786 to 809, Caliph Harun al-Rashid established a major Bimaristan that doubled as a teaching hospital as well. So what these people were doing was they were actually not only taking what they've kind of took with their culture through time, through history, but these guys were actually looking at ancient Greek and Latin stuff and actually taking it and putting it with their body of work, which would lay out the foundation for these future European doctors and scientists to actually refer to. And last point. Yep, that was my last point.
All right.
Let's bring Dr. Ihab back in with this question. So, as you know, we have addressed mental health and how or whether it played upon our upbringing. So why do you think, and probably this is a question for both of you, but we'll bring Dr. Ihab Abdelrehim in, is why do you think if our culture and our history recognizing mental health and established a hospitalization, an institution to treat that emotional well-being, why do you think that we grew up without the acknowledgement or the recognition of mental health needed to be addressed?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Mr. Bell, the rest of the...
Good to have you with us.
Yeah, hey, everybody.
You're tuned in to something timeless. Welcome to Family History Drama. Real lessons, real ancestors, real drama. Old-fashioned radio storytelling with modern-day immersive audio. True family stories of outlaws and soldiers, lions and rattlesnakes, miracles, disasters, and the tragedies of humanity. Look us up and listen in. There's a link in the show notes or find us on any podcast app. Family History Drama. True stories told like legend.
So you're asking me why we were not taught this with respect to us now versus what happened in the past when it was like actually being treated in these hospitals, right? Because
obviously in our Islamic history, according to you guys, those facts, Islamic history always recognized mental health.
Yeah.
They created a medical institutions and medical schools to treat mental health. So when did we stop acknowledging mental health and emotional well-being? Because we were raised that get over it.
Yeah, that's something I would not know when that happened. I don't know. That's a good question that I have no idea when we stopped kind of thinking and really worrying about mental health the way it was thought about back in the year 600, 700, 800. Again, I don't know when that stopped, because when your mom would tell you Bimaristan is an asylum, when it actually was a hospital, which happened to see people with kind of mental kind of issues and things like that. It's wild, and I don't know when that happened, to be honest. And my mom would have said it to me too, Bimaristan, and I did not know what Bimaristan was. It's basically just a hospital. It doesn't mean it's a mental institution or asylum of any kind. It's just a hospital that treated many people, both physical and psychological, but it morphed all of a sudden to, in some point in the past, to being just kind of an asylum or something like that, where it would be people had no idea it was for physical type issues and diseases and things. So kind of one of the things I was reading was kind of talking about the Bimaristan and the Bimaristan back in the time when it was created. This was all free healthcare. Now, this is a great part of it. It was free healthcare. The Bimaristan and the Arab Muslim world offered, world-class healthcare without charging the patient a penny, right? And no patient was turned away regardless of their race, religion, gender, type of illness, including mental illness and contagious diseases, which is very interesting. Besides having a separate wards for different illnesses, patients suffering from anxiety, showing signs of psychological distress, were treated to the same urgency as patients with a physical illness. So that's again, we're kind of talking about what Dr. Slava said. It's a remarkable fact, given that mental health has only recently been taken seriously in the Western world and Western medicine. So, and on top of all this, the patients, as well as the practitioners in the Bimaristan, would have been Muslim, Jewish, or Christian, with up to 28 physicians doing their rounds in each institution. And most hospitals included pharmacies carrying medicine and remedies imported from far away as India, China, whatever it might be, again, incorporating the different cultures and the different medicines from around the world to bring this world-class service to the patients. And again, the majority of this was all funded by endowments from the wealthy people that are living in the city, and there was a stipulation in the Bimaristan that anybody that comes into the Bimaristan is treated until they were completely cured. So they would stay there until they were cured. So that was another kind of very interesting fact. But what really I want to kind of come back to is that it did not look at anybody's race, religion, in any way, and Muslim, Jewish, and Christians. It was awesome. The religions were all involved, whether it be a doctor or a patient, and nobody was turned away. So this is kind of this is something that I look at and I go, wow, this happened back then, and that can't bring us to our modern time where we have a lot of this disjointed kind of, things that happen between different groups in the Middle East or whatever it might be. And I wish we went back to this and kind of said, hey, we don't care who they are. We're just going to treat them, and we're going to treat them like human beings. And so that was I
love that. And that's one of the reasons why, again, we're supposed to learn from history, because for better or for worse, right? You want to repeat the good stuff and not repeat the bad stuff. So, but no, to one of your points, Dr. Ihab, which we'll find out a little later, who this world changing physician is, Al-Razi. I was thinking as you were talking, Al-Razi and others articulated medical ethics centered on compassion for all, insisting, quote, the doctor's aim is to do good, period. Profession forbids us to do harm. You know what I'm thinking? I'm like, who is this Hippocratic guy that you guys, doctors, take an oath to? We need to be quoting, this guy, taking an oath to this guy, Al-Razi, because it looks like he was, way before. So, but yeah, interesting.
So as a reminder, the Islamic Golden Age is when the Islamic Empire had secured the position in the world. And the whole world was so surprised of the rate of the success, how much they accomplished in such a short time after Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam passed away. And it was the center of alchemy. It was the center of knowledge. It was the center of harmony, coexisting. It was the center of poetry, art, and culture. So that drew a lot of the outsiders to come into that golden age of the Islamic Empire to experience that, because it was a very novel concept that the world really needed to just be in peace and be humane. I think that's where humanity, the concept of humanity, freedom from discrimination, freedom from oppression, suppression, violence, conflict started. This is humanity. And the Islamic Empire was a master in illustrating and demonstrating how we can actually coexist, co-regulate, and co-create together. And these concepts are not new. These concepts are ancient concepts, and the world these days is reflecting on that. If you watch any space on social media, you have a lot of advocates that we coexist, we'll co-create, we'll co-regulate together because we're human. This is humanity. Humanity doesn't see color. Humanity doesn't see religion. Humanity doesn't see gender. Humanity does not see language. Humanity is humanity, right? We're all made we're all made from the same things. It just, we practice and we approach life a little bit differently. So I was taught that constantly, as I mentioned before, since my early education was in Saudi Arabia. And my favorite subject was history. I am very grateful for the Saudi education system that gave me that knowledge of history. And I used to go home. I was so proud of our heritage. I was so proud of how much we accomplished during the very short time. And it is the advancement of medicine, the advancement of science, the advancement of astrology, the advancement of literature, the advancement of poetry, the advancement of even music. It happened during the Islamic Golden Era. So we are trying to bring that forward into the world again, to say, hey, it's not in our nature to discriminate. It's not in our nature to differentiate. It's not in our nature to segregate. That's not us. That's not us. Because if our heritage and our blood had that monumental advancement, how could we regress, like one of my friends was saying, back to the ape time and start like creating conflict, creating tension, creating misunderstanding, resentment, anger? That's not in us. So when did this flip around? I believe, in my opinion, and I'm a student of history, and JD Yusef, you can jump in anytime, is when I believe that Western world was threatened by that accomplishment, by that influence, impact on the world. And it is, I believe, out of jealousy. Why can't I be that way? Because according to Dr. Ihab's data, professionals from all around Europe were just at awe of, what is this? Is this? And sometimes they used to accuse us of magic too, because when you don't understand something or you do not comprehend something, you accuse it of being heresy. You're, idolizing. You are not, in a good faith. This is magic. This is, too spiritual because I don't understand it. And I think that's what caused the decline of the Islamic world. Power, humanitarian power, not political power, humanitarian power, because as we mentioned in other episodes, Amr ibn al-As, when he was commissioned by Abu Bakr alayhi salam to go to Egypt and spread Islam, they came in peace. They spread Islam. They did not destroy any churches. They did not destroy any synagogue. They did not destroy any religion buildings. And I'm not sure if you guys know, we were taught in Islam that we are allowed to worship in any of the other two faith, right, institutions. So as a Muslim, I am allowed to go into any church and pray, and that prayer is accepted. As a Muslim, I am allowed to go to any synagogue to pray, just in case there are no mosques around, and to pray, and that prayer is accepted. Now, if you flip it around, my roommate in dental school, she was a Jewish New Yorker, and I used to stay with her in her condo when we had to study all night long. And one Saturday, she said, do you want to come with me? I'm going to the synagogue, or do you want to stay and study? I said, I would love to go. And she was amazing. She was such a sweetheart, and we stayed in touch for a while, even after graduating. And I went there with her, and she said, of course, we had to cover our head. It's the same as very similar to our culture. And so I covered my head and went in, and the rabbi stopped me. And he goes, I don't recognize you. I said, my name is Slava. I am, her friend. And I'm just here to really attend and get some kind of peace, because prayer is peace to me. I wasn't planning to pray the Islamic prayer, just out of respect. He goes, no, I can't let you in because you're not Jewish. And I said, but I promise I'll just stay in the back. I just want to listen to the Torah reciting, the humming, the chanting, because it's just going to bring me peace. He goes, I'm sorry. If you're not Jewish, I cannot let you in. So he was kind enough to keep the door open. We were inside in the foyer, to keep the door open. And they had benches, and I sat just outside the door in order for me to listen to it. But that will not happen in Islamic setting. In Islam, we are allowed any worshiper, Christian or Jewish, because those are the holders of the book, okay, to come into the mosque as long as they come in peace, take a corner, you pray the way you pray, because we all three religions are supposed to be praying to the same God in a different way. But unfortunately, it's not the other way around. So I'll leave that to our audience to come to the conclusion which approach is more peaceful. So back to you, Yusuf.
No, I think that was very well said, and I think Dr. Ihab, did you have some points to make in response?
Yeah, I did. It's funny. You know how you tried to, go with your friend to the synagogue. I was in the mosque one time. I was very young. Well, not very young. I was young. And this gentleman came off the street and just wanted to kind of observe the prayer time and all that. And he was Christian. And I can't remember who met him as he's coming in. And he's explaining, I'm not Muslim, and I really kind of want to see, just Islam. And the guy said, absolutely. Since you're not going to pray with us, you can come up to the where we pray upstairs, and you can sit right in the back and watch the whole thing, because you're not going to be, you don't know what to do exactly in the prayer, but you can sit and observe. It's not a problem. It's absolutely no problem. And the guy sat down, and I was there. I was praying. And as I was leaving, I believe he wanted to kind of get more information about Islam. So he sat with someone there that, informed him about, like, in detail about a lot of different things, it looks like. And if I remember correctly, I believe the guy became Muslim afterwards, and I saw him later, which was kind of neat because, he was wanting to check things out, wanting to see what was out there. And Christianity is also open to this. I know this for sure, that if you go to a church and you feel like, you know what, I'm atheist or whatever it might be, and you get this feeling in your heart that, God is in there, and you were in a Christian church, and you would be allowed 100% in the church. And when you would, and if you wanted to convert or not convert, if you're atheist, you're really not converting from anything, but you want to become part of this Christian group, Catholicism, Orthodox, whatever it might be, they would welcome you open arms. And I go back to you, JD Yusef, and you can let us know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. I think there's some really good points. And I think as well, this is another good topic for a future conversation.
Yeah,
Talk about spirituality and what does that really mean? And, because I hear a lot of young people, especially in the Christian faith, is, they just get bored, or they don't understand, or they're looking for something deeper. So what do? They go off and look at these, Eastern religions, and totally cool. No judgment. But again, they're yearning for something deeper, right? So, but yeah, I think that's a really, really good segue for another great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But, to kind of bring things back, I had a point. Okay, regarding the world-changing physicians I mentioned earlier, I wanted to kind of give these guys credit because I think that's really necessary. So the first one that I mentioned was Al-Razi, distinguished measles from smallpox. He authored over 200 medical works and initiated experimental medicine in pediatrics and immunology. Ibn Sina, I'm sure a lot of people have heard him. Actually authored the Canon of Medicine in 1025, an encyclopedia compendium used as a medical standard in Europe for centuries. Al-Zahrawi revolutionized surgery with al-tasrif, detailing over 200 surgical tools and techniques, many used in Europe until the 1700s. Ibn Zuhair performed early experimental tracheotomies and advanced veterinary and human medicine in Andalusia. Ibn al-Nafis corrected Galilean's heart anatomy by theorizing pulmonary circulation centuries before William Harvey. That's pretty amazing. And also to tie it in as well, bringing it back full circle to what Dr. Slava and Dr. Ihab were saying, with this fascination with the sick and helping the needy, it can be argued that, with the onset of Islam, this kind of entrenched that idea of taking care of your fellow man, treating everybody as an equal. There's a floating argument out there that I'd have to do a little bit more research, but one of them was actually detailing the spread of Christianity out of the pagan world, and they actually attributed it strictly to the interactions with the poor and the needy, how this new Christian community actually cared for people who they never met, never knew, and that was somehow transformative. But again, something that I heard, and I'd have to do a little more research. But again, I can personally point to, there was a huge section or, parable in the Bible dealing with the sick and specifically the lepers. Leprosy was like a taboo, a scary thing. These are people you stayed away from. It was almost haram to associate with these people. So that was transformative. And again, I don't know if in Judaism there is that sort of, compassion for the other. I'd assume so, but I only fully saw it articulated within Islam and Christianity. So I don't know. It's just interesting points.
So, kind of to add to that, when you were talking about the different scientists or physicians that were, I think you named about 5 or 6 of them. And just to add, Al-Zahrawi, the one you were talking about, the father of kind of medicine and surgery, he wrote a 30-volume encyclopedia. 30 volumes. Wow. I can't even read a book. This guy wrote 30 of them about medicine. And these encyclopedias on medical practices were used in Europe up until the 18th century, which I think you mentioned, the 1700s or so.
Yep.
Which is about,
Yep.
Which is really, really neat. And one of them, and I'm talking about some of the treatments they did. One of the big treatments that he had pioneered was eye surgery, especially cataract surgery. Cataract surgery in that year. Wow. Right? And that's one of the big success stories. And I'm almost sure that's where we kind of morphed into our modern cataract surgery with our modern tools and equipment that we have now. But doing a cataract surgery back then on an eye is wild.
So real quick, not to cut you off, and to that point, it's funny, and I've actually learned this from Dr. Slava, in the U.S. Civil War era, battlefield surgery without anesthesia was brutal, amputations were routine, and barbers, haircut, performed both haircuts and tooth extractions, often with unsanitary conditions. So we're talking about cataract surgery in predating 300, 400, 500 years. And here, medicine in the U.S. and medieval times was incredibly horrific and brutal.
JD Yusef, you got a great point there. Why? Now, here's the one wild thing. The Civil War, isn't that long ago?
Not that long ago.
Yeah, and it was hundreds of years after these cataract surgeries and after the surgeries that Al-Zahrawi was working on, how did not translate from there, obviously, to Europe, and then carried from Europe to United States for the Civil War? Why did it not, like, I mean, they had no anesthesia. And I don't think they had any clean environments to do these surgeries, and people would probably get gangrene. When you,
1000%.
I mean, it's a possibility, and it's because that you didn't have any kind of antiseptics or anything to clean the area, or I don't know about washing the hands. I'm sure they did that, but they didn't use probably alcohol, or maybe they use alcohol. But it's a really, it's almost like you progress and on the timeline and on Earth, and then it regresses back hundreds of years later, even though you have the knowledge. And it's almost like, I don't know, almost like they wanted to avoid using it or didn't want to use it because it's from the Islamic Empire. I have no clue the reason why people don't think. I mean, now we do as scientists, like we look back and we pull things from different times, and whether it be 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30, 100 years ago, things that Einstein talked about and theorized back in the early 1900s. People now are running experiments and seeing it was true for some of those theories. And it's amazing that you're going, oh, you know what? Let me look back. Oh, Einstein said that. We're working on an experiment. Now we have proof that this theory is real. What the problem is Civil War times, or whatever time in medieval culture, the year 800, 900, 1000 in medieval Europe. If they didn't draw, and I think they did, they finally did draw from the Islamic, and they had church, they had hospitals. But it's interesting that, and Europe did have that knowledge by the time we had the Civil War here. So why did they not take some, Islamic, European, and bring it here? I have no clue. Here's another point. These are medical hospitals, moving mobile hospitals, right? I mentioned in the beginning of our conversation that in the year 627, the first military hospital was created. And then after that, over the next, 100 years, I believe, there was many of these for the battles, and they followed, these military hospitals followed the troops. Again, I don't know. I don't think during Civil War they had military hospitals as advanced as they did in the year 700 or 650. So where and why did the knowledge get dropped? That's kind of a question I have. And no one here I don't know if anybody knows the answer to this, but I believe it's just interesting to me that it was a knowledge that was there, present. You had it. It's right in front of you, but we're not going to utilize it. And it wasn't capitalized on, and it should have been.
And I think a little bit has to do with, again, acknowledging something of greatness, and then you realizing it's not associated with either your belief system, your religion, your culture. I think has a lot to do with it. And then also the second big glaring reason is a similar reason why we don't know how the pyramids were built today. We had the knowledge, had the resources, had the tools, and then it's just gone. So I guess that's also a piece of this human element that we're currently living in, unfortunately, for what it is. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. And the other thing is that the other types of treatment that were really big back then, these groundbreaking surgeries, anatomical and disease studies they had. And they also focused on less visible conditions that you see physically. And they were looking at psychological disorder, which, that's a big thing. I mean, again, going back to the medieval times, if somebody were to have a seizure from epilepsy, they would think it was the devil inside them. They were witches. They'd burn them at the stake, for God's sakes. It's just, it's wild. But in Islam, if you had an epileptic seizure, it wouldn't be like, oh, there's the devil inside you. We got to like kill you, execute you, or burn you to purify you from this evil, which obviously they didn't understand. And again, epilepsy is a physical, and I think it has to do kind of with the brain. And I mean, it's just, there's a lot of things involved. And I believe, and I don't know anything about epilepsy being treated in these hospitals. I didn't go in depth into that, but I'm sure in these Islamic hospitals, they would not be thought as, oh my goodness, you've been taken over by the devil.
And for a point to our listeners and viewers for a clarification, if in the event in the real world you hear of X, Y, and Z, them performing this under, an Islamic or even a Christian name, which, to your average person would be considered forbidden or haram, well, that's these people utilizing what they know, their knowledge and their culture, and they're putting it in front of the religion. So they may be articulating it with religion, but also, like, for example, what's the thing in one of the tribes in Africa where they, do the clipping of the female genitals or whatever? Like, this was done in also Christian areas, but it's certainly not Christian. It's certainly not Islamic, but it's attributed to these religions just because of how so that's something just to kind of keep in mind. So you will hear these things, but it's not standard. That's not, so anyway.
Yeah. And then people who suffer from these mental illnesses, it was cutting edge. Think about it. Not only physical, what we see, somebody has, a wound or whatever, they have cataract issues or whatever it might be. They had these really ingenious ways and new ways of treating mental illness. They separated them from the general patient pool, had their own wards, right? And in these wards, they had remedial tools instead of like just medicine, meaning they had music therapy, which I'll get into in a moment here. And what they would do is they'd have abundant light for the patient. So, they might put them in a room with a lot of windows. They have beautiful music, sounds, running water that help calm the patients down, plenty of fresh air, conversation. Now, here's the thing. When you sit and converse with somebody, what is that? That's a therapist, right? An idea of what we have now. I go see a therapist. You go see a therapist. You go see whoever goes to see a therapist. You sit down for 45 minutes, and what are you doing with the therapist? You're having a conversation with them.
I love that.
They're talking to you, and they're asking you questions, and you're answering the questions. How do you feel today? All these things were present at that time. And when I say they had conversations, it was not like, hey, how would you have for dinner last night? It's not that kind of conversation. It was a conversation to how do you feel, your mental state? And then they would work through, it could be, they would have then music therapy for them to figure, if they figure something out, they might put them on music therapy, which is something I'll talk to you about later. But it's just one of the things that was available and in their tool belt to help these patients with their mental illness. And it's really, I was surprised about that, that part right there, because they're treating something that's visually seen, right, by you, wounds or something going on, into something that's invisible. It's in the mind, but it still affects you, anxiety, depression, and they work on that with you. And the reason why I believe they separated you from the main hospital where you had your own ward is to really concentrate on these patients, to give them that quiet environment, because, they could be doing a surgery and, they could hear sound, people, yelling in pain or maybe whatever it might be. They didn't want them to hear any of that or be distracted by any of that. And they put them in their own ward. I believe it's to really focus on their psychological pain. So
and needs and wants. And also, now that you're talking about that, I almost feel like having this alone time that you're talking about was a serious luxury back then. Like, if you just kind of think about it, nobody went to their room and closed the door. Like, there wasn't any of that. So it really does make sense, just having that. Now you have your one-on-one time, or, yeah. So I don't know. That is very, very enlightening and powerful.
Just to give our audience a timeline, antibiotics was discovered in 1928. So the excuse of saying that we don't have antibiotics to give a amputee in the Civil War. Civil War was 1860s, if I'm not mistaken, the American Civil War. We're talking about 700 AD. The Civil War was 1860, 1860 AD. So how is it possible, and that's a question to you guys and the audience, how is it possible during the Islamic Golden Age performing surgeries without the presence of antibiotics, being successful with these surgeries, adding advancement into the medical practices, okay? But in the 1860s, during the American Civil War, people developed sepsis, developed gangrene, they died from amputation. So if we are using the excuse, oh, there was no antibiotics since antibiotics was discovered in 1928, how did the Islamic medical world achieve success recoveries from all these practices without the antibiotics, while the Western world was struggling to figure that out? And the answer, I think, is because they refused and they rejected the past knowledge of the Islamic medical practices because they wanted to create their own. And it's just a way of saying we are dominant, we want our way or the highway, instead of building on the historical, like I said, advancement of the medical practices. So it is fascinating, just like when you trying to teach a 5-year-old, don't do this, you are going to get hurt. Because I know I've been on this earth a lot longer than you, and I'm giving you my life experience, observational data, that if you continue doing what you're doing, you are going to regret it. If that child refuses to listen, they have to learn, right, their own way. But then they will regress. They have to pull back and start from the beginning, building on their own experiences instead of using my experience as a shortcut, right, to build upon and moving forward. And I believe if the Western world did listen and they were wise enough to build the medical advancement of humanity on the Islamic Golden Age discoveries, we would have been, as humanity, so advanced. But every time somebody who wants to dominate and wants to be by force the center of attention, canceling all the knowledge, just like when they burned the Library of Alexandria. We lost so much knowledge. Can you imagine if we have that knowledge still intact and we built our life on that knowledge, how advanced humanity would be? So when you say, oh, the excuse is we didn't have antibiotics back then, how did these hospitals and those medical experts during the 700, now Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, he passed away, 640? That is a huge advancement. And you're talking about 700, 50 years, 60, 80 years after, him passing, we were so advanced. Why? Because that says that our innate drive to advance is so powerful that we actually accomplish so much in such a short period of time. And we see the gap from 700 AD to 1860, when the Civil War was happening, there was not much going on. They were backwards and backwards and backwards. And I agree with Ihab, when women had their menstrual cycles, they start bleeding out, right? They used to plug them so they don't bleed out. And they died from internal infection because bleeding out is a sign of the devil. They did not understand that, right?
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yes. It's
Wild.
research. Because bleeding out, they did not understand that when you have your monthly flow,
Yeah.
it's a sign of that there is no conceivement. There's no baby. They didn't understand that. They were so scared of it. They used to plug them, right? And not let them bleed out. And then they used to die, you know?
I've heard that before, yeah.
That almost what we call al-jahl in Arabic, ignorance, right? If they built that science of women anatomy, women physiology from that golden era, they would have never treated, the Western world never treated women the way they treated them and consider them or saw them or look at them as witches, define, you know, it's out of definement against the male presence and everything that was strange to them in the Western world. It was the work of the devil. No, God creates everything. And that's how the Islamic world looked at it. They looked at the disabled as, this is God creations. God must have, right, some kind of a message for us to send us that disability, and we need to look into it for us to gain knowledge, not to put them on the side and shunt them as they are, you know, even worse than animals. Sometimes they were treated. Knowing that in the 1950s and the 1960s, they used to do insulin shock treatment to girls of very affluent families. If they will not listen to their families will actually put them in mental institutions, and they will shoot them with insulin. They call it the insulin shock to hopefully have them submit to the wishes of their families. Now, that's barbaric. We're talking about 1940s, 1950s, even in the 60s, I think. So I learned that from one of the historians that I listened to on YouTube, that she actually went through that. She was born with a deformity in her private parts, and her family were very, very affluent, very, very rich, and they could not have that on their reputation, right? So they used to send her to this, you know, Bimaristan, as we refer to, right? And they used to give her insulin shocks to just have her submit to the fact that, no, you are a boy, you're not a girl because of your deformity, and I'm not going to do corrective surgery because you are a freak, basically. So that's...
Yeah. I'll tell you another thing about you. I want to jump on what you're saying. In 1932, this is wild. 1932 to 1972, there was something called the Tuskegee syphilis study. Do you guys know about it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wild. It happened in Alabama, and the experiment was on black men only. Okay. And as you know, we have medication for syphilis at that time. They wanted to see, they intentionally left them untreated. I mean, this kind of goes on like, it's unbelievable. This is, up to the 1970s, they were doing this experiment, and they wanted to see what the progression of the disease was for the participants, with the treatment, like without any treatment, even after penicillin became widely available. They wanted to see how it would affect their mental state, because syphilis really messes with your brain. It's a very bad disease if it's gone untreated. They had penicillin, but didn't use it. And it's just it's the unethical things we did in the United States, which nobody really talks about. And it's that same idea. You plug a woman because she's having a menstrual cycle. What are you doing?
It's the same concept with in the South when they got it from the Germans, the study of eugenics. Someone's skeletal structure, bone structure makes them subhuman, non-human. Looking at African Americans and Black people, and to that point, especially with the, not to get too controversial with the whole COVID vaccinations, majority in the South, the African American community and Black people did not oblige at all. And it was because of these instances, and they're not so long past where they were being used as, just guinea pigs. And by the way, the breadth of information when it comes to gynecology or women's health was built on the backs of African American women who went through hell, just to, so it's incredibly gruesome. And I'm glad that you brought up that point. So thank you.
Even if, real quick, the concept of a nursing home, the concept of just because you can't take care of your elder, you just ship them up to a nursing home, let somebody else take care of them. We didn't have that. We didn't have that in the This is a new concept in the Arab Islamic world because we are dutiful towards our classical tribal connection, and family is everything.
Respect,
we have so many family members. They passed in their own beds, and the family takes turn take care of them. So the idea of I'm too busy. I know, my mom or your parents, they gave you life, right? They gave you life with the God's ability to do so. You can't just shunt them just because you don't want to take care of them. How about when you were acting crazy as a 5-year-old? Who took care of you? When you had high fever, who took care of you? When you were having an anxiety attack or panic attack or emotionally, dramatic, who took care of you is your parents. So we go back to the fact that even nursing homes, that's a new concept because of the Western world, because it's a business to open a nursing home so we can charge the families. Hey, we can take care of your family. You don't have to worry about it. You can just, turn a blind eye to that, and we'll take care of your family. No, we take care of our family. I'm not going to send my mom or my dad to a nursing home, even if they are schizophrenic, even if they are dementia, even if they have Alzheimer's. And I have stories from my Arab friends that the grandparents that had Alzheimer's, they used to beat up the kids because they go into this rage episode. Did the kid report that? Did they call the cops? No, they took it, right? Because they were empathetic and sympathetic and humane towards their parents, saying, it's okay. I know that you don't mean it. It's just the disease. And they still took care of them till the last day. That's the difference between the traditional, like I said, tribal connection and the unlimited mindset of the Islamic Golden Age towards the sick, towards the vulnerable, towards the disabled. It's humanity, it's empathy, and it's very graceful, it's humility. And unfortunately, again, we have been living in the echo chamber of the stereotype that we are the ones that constantly doing the wrong thing. We are the ones that's backwards. We are the one that wishing harm on we're the one that discriminatory. But it's a whole opposite, not because I want you to take my word for it. Listen to history, stick to the facts, and make your own judgment. So we have reached to the end of our hour. So thank you so much for our panel. And I'm sure we're gonna have more episodes for us to touch base, like JD Yusef says, spirituality. And I'm sure Ihab has even more data and stories about that we would love to share with you. So as a reminder, these episodes are uploaded every single Wednesday on the Apple and Spotify podcast space. and they're available to you to watch whenever you want, wherever you are, as videos on the Greenwood Dental Partners YouTube channel too. So if you like this content, please like, share, and hit the notification button so you do not miss any episodes. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. This is Slava